Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Anna Sheena Walsh, and I lead marketing at Cast Iron. For those of you who aren't familiar, Cast Iron is a food business management platform designed to help food entrepreneurs start, run, and grow their businesses. If you're interested, obviously, please let me know. But that is not why we're here today. We are here today to hang out with Brette Hawks to talk a little bit about Business Bookkeeping 101. And I am so excited. So I'm going to kick it over to her to get going.
Okay, well, I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm sure I can already see in the chat that a lot of you, we already know each other, but for those of you who we haven't met yet, like she said, my name is Brette. I have run my own home-based cake business for the past officially 3 years, right? There's like that official mark where I actually registered it, licensed it. And then there was several years behind that where it was like kind of doing things here and there and like dabbling in it before I actually like hit go and started it. So I've been doing that for 3 years. I've got 2 kiddos, and it has been such an incredible journey to be able to take control of my life. I get to be home with my kids. I get to do this creative, fun thing that I really love with baking. I get to be in control of my income. I make more than I ever did at any 9-to-5 job. And in fact, there was a point in my life where it was either I go get a job because we can't afford our living situation, or I make this thing work. And I chose to go forward and make this baking business thing actually become something. And it really has. And it's been fun to grow it. And I started coaching. I started kind of turning around and teaching what I've done and the business principles I've learned along the way. Because I just feel like when I was starting, I was looking for resources, I was looking for help, and there was definitely angels and sweet people along the way that helped me. But I felt like there was so much lack in like a clear outline or recipe to actually have success. And I thought, you know what, I want to be that for other people. I was able to get here. My goal is that other women and moms and anybody who gets into home baking can actually make it into a viable, thriving business where you get to control your creativity and your income and all of those things and have that freedom in your life. So that's why I'm here. And a lot of this I learned by myself. I went to school for food science and didn't like chemistry much. And so I took this other track called the industry management track, or the business track as we called it. And during that time in school, I got to take things like entrepreneurship, marketing and strategy, accounting and finance, and found out that I actually really enjoyed some of those things. Didn't actually understand them very well until I started applying them to my own business. And I'm having these light bulb moments of like, oh my gosh, that's Econ 210. That's all coming back now. That was Finance 110. Like, I get it now. So just to kind of like wrap that into a nutshell, what I want to say is like, I'm not a finance professional. And as I teach these principles, these are things that I've learned that have worked for me. Every single year I've filed our own taxes, and until last year when we actually hired someone and I worked with them. And so I've learned a lot in the process. I don't think my financial advice replaces that of like a financial advisor or a CPA, but there's definitely so much you can do on your own and figure out. And if someone can just kind of clarify and like string it all together, connect point A to point B. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I'm going to talk about why bookkeeping is so important for your business, because it really is. We're going to talk about how to have some good financial habits. And then I'm going to pull up some of my books and show you how I track each month and how I manage my expenses and figure all that out with a system that works for me. Why is this so important, my friends? Okay, number one is covering your legal bases with taxes. I mean, I don't know if any of you have experienced it, but when you get to tax time at the end of the year and you're like, oh crap, like I don't have anything. I have no idea how much I made, what I spent, any of those little nitpicky things. And for me as a business owner, I always want to make sure I cover my legal bases. I don't want to endanger myself or my family or my business by not following those legal things in places. And taxes, they kind of suck. It's like this thing that you're like, I want to make money, but then I have to pay money to the government. Like, and that's the whole other can of worms. But one thing that's really cool about if you're properly paying your taxes on your business with your baking business, or even for some of you who aren't bakers, if you have other food businesses, if you're properly paying your taxes, guess what happens? Now you have evidence and proof backing your income. So that came into play really important for me and my family this past year because we wanted to buy a house. And for the past 3 or 4 years, we've been meeting with different banks, we've been trying to get financing, and obviously the market has just like gotten worse and worse and worse and felt more and more and more unattainable. But because this last year, when we went in this time, because I had paid taxes on my business and I had paperwork and bookkeeping to back it up, I had evidence and proof of my income, we were able to get financed for double what we had in the past because now my income counted. It wasn't just this little side gig that Brette had. It was like, no, this is the real thing. She's registered, she's paid her taxes on it. And so it's the reason why we were able to buy a house this summer, because of that financing and the way that that worked out. So you do want to cover those legal bases, and you want to track things so that you have that proof and that evidence of your income. The other thing, so when it comes to taxes, there's 2 taxes you're going to pay, and we're not going to dive too deep into taxes, but I'll just cover it like super surface level. When you pay your taxes with your business, there's 2 taxes that you pay. One is your income tax, which you kind of don't know until the end of the year, but you can kind of project and plan for it. So I set aside money as I go along, projecting what my income tax is going to be. And then at the end of the year, I have a little bit to pay in case I owe anything. And then I track my expenses, and I'm smart and I roll my business into everyday life. When I go to the grocery store, I get my cake stuff. Then when I drop off a cake, we stop and visit a friend. And so life just becomes business, and everything becomes a write-off, so that it offsets that income. And that's kind of the game you're playing. You're like, I want to make as much money, but I also want to just make my everyday life become business, so that every expense I have can almost be a business expense. My phone, my mortgage, my car, my gas, all of that. You track that so that when tax time comes, you can show in your books to your tax account, to your CPA, or if you do it yourself, you've got that those books to help you calculate your numbers. And then you can offset your income so that you don't owe as much in income tax. That's the game you're playing here. And the second tax you're paying is sales tax. And I pay that throughout the year. Again, I just collect it monthly. And then I pay quarterly. I'm at a point with my registered business that I pay quarterly. I used to pay annually, and it depends on where you live, what the rules are, change from state to state, from county, city. They get all over the place, what your tax rate is and things like that. But if you're setting aside your sales tax, that's something you can charge your customers. I'm pretty sure if you're on cast iron, it collects it for you. Am I right, Anna?
Yeah, so there's some tax paperwork in there. Right now, it's through our customer success team. You can talk to them, but in the future, that'll all be automated as well.
I love that. Oh, that's amazing. You guys are the coolest. I just love everything that you guys do.
Thank you.
So yeah, the sales tax is there. You want to make sure you're setting it aside. So part of the bookkeeping, number one reason why you want to do it is to make sure you're covering your taxes and your legal bases there. Number 2 reason why this is so important and you don't want to skip on it is because bookkeeping helps you make smart decisions with your business. If you don't know what you're making, if you don't know what your expenses are, and you can't see it playing out, you don't have a map for going forward. And the numbers will tell you that story. They'll tell you what's working. They'll tell you what's not working. They'll help you see where you should put your focus and where your time is actually being best spent. And it'll help you to know where you can like back off on your costs or be smart and find alternative routes in order to maximize your income. But if you don't keep your books, then you really don't know which way you're going. And I always say you're throwing buttercream at the wall and hoping that it sticks. You're like crossing your fingers every month. I hope I have money to spend, and where is my money going? I don't know. I did all this work, and where's the money? That's what bookkeeping will tell you. So when you keep good books, you can forecast and you can budget and you can plan your whole year. You can prep for November of 2023 right now and forecast exactly what you're going to make based on your past books and projections and your goals. And then you could go out and market and use strategy to actually make it happen. That's the beautiful thing. It's not a guessing game anymore. Your books and your budget and your plans will actually help you move forward with your business in the right direction to actually hit your goals. And it's not a guessing game anymore. So we get that it's important. Let's lay a groundwork. You need some good basic financial habits in your business before we get into the mechanics and logistics of a system for bookkeeping. You want to have just some basic good financial habits behind you so that you're ready to move forward with that. The first thing you're going to do is you want a separate bank account for your business. This doesn't have to be like some fancy account that you open. It doesn't even technically need to be a business account. There's some perks there depending on where you bank. And honestly, mine, it's just another checking and savings account that I open in my name that I use solely for business. And the reason, I can't even tell you how this changes your world. For anyone out there who hasn't done this yet, this is the biggest game changer because it's like I just knew that I needed to do it when I actually 3 years ago was like, okay, I'm all in, registered, licensed. I was like, I'm getting a bank account for my business. And all of a sudden, instead of money coming into our bank, our family's checking account and going like just into the ether, right? And you have to tell your husband like, hey, I have to buy $50 of butter this month, but I promise the money's like coming in, it's coming back, it's there. All of a sudden that wasn't happening anymore because I had my own account where that's where my revenue went. I could see it. I'm like, look, here it is. And then I knew I had money to buy all the ingredients I needed. I stopped skimping. You ever skimp? You're like, oh, I've got to do this order and it's probably four sticks of butter, but like maybe I could get by on 3, or like I'm just gonna buy that one box and hope that it stretches. And then it's like not fun. It's not fun for you as a creative person to feel like you have to stretch your materials. But when you know that you've got that ingredient money because it's in that bank account where you can see it and it is for business, you're able to actually invest in those ingredients and supplies and tools that you need because you can see where it is. The other reason it's so helpful is that you don't have to sort out your expenses from your personal things, which gets so messy and so tricky. And what I love to do to keep track of my expenses, I just export the whole file for my business account because I know it's all business and I'm able to sort it out really easy. Like, oh, this was an ingredient purchase, this was revenue. And there's not all these family, like it's so much less work if it's all just business. So having your own bank account there really helps. With my bank account, I've got my checking and that's where all my revenue goes to. And that's where my typical supplies go out of. If I buy ingredients at the store, that it's like that one checking account is where it goes in and out. I also have a savings account where every month I'm transferring business savings over so that I can build up a cushion if I ever don't have enough to pay myself, or if I want to invest in a camera or in a class. There's a savings account there where I've been steadily like setting things aside so that I can actually grow my business. We'll talk about that some more in a little bit. I also have just a couple other savings accounts where I can like sort out like, here's where my tax money goes, here's where my sales tax goes, and I separate it out that way. And each month I'll sit down and I'll move it around. Which brings me to the second financial habit that you need to have. Number 1, separate bank account. Number 2, look at that bank account. I recommend at least weekly, open it up, take a glance. And then at least once a month, sit down and have a little financial meeting with yourself. Schedule it. Grab a babysitter, take yourself to a cafe, bring your laptop, and have a finance meeting with yourself. Go through your expenses, make sure it's all where it needs to be. And just kind of check in with yourself, give yourself that paycheck. I pay myself once a month. I treat myself like an employee because that way my cash flow is more balanced. I'm not just spending money as fast as I'm making it. And it just helps me to be able to track what I actually paid myself and where I actually am as far as my own income goals. And I had this goal that I wanted to make as much as my husband did every single month with my baking business. And because I paid myself once a month like this, I was able to see like, ooh, I'm so close. This month I did it. This month we went back a little bit, but this month I did it again. And I could like kind of see and if I was reaching that goal and start to adjust if I needed to. And just treating yourself like an employee, because you're your one and only employee. I think treating yourself that way helps you not only manage your books, but it helps you be a better boss to yourself as well. If you remember that your only employee is going to quit if you don't treat them well. So remember that. So once a week, give your bank account a glance. Once a month, sit down, have a finance meeting, move that money around, put that tax money aside, pay yourself. And I just had a thought. Oh, if you don't like to look, because I wish we could do a hand raise. Like anybody out there hate to look at it. They just don't. It causes so much anxiety and so much stress to even. They're like, I just don't want to know. I just don't want to see it because it might tell me a story that I don't want to know. It might tell me that I didn't make as much as I thought I did. But the beautiful thing is that knowing and looking at it is so much better than not knowing, because when it's going to be the same either way, it's like the same story. The money is either there or it's not, whatever you're doing. If you don't look, you can't do anything about it. If you look and you sit down, you check your numbers, you can take control of it and you can see where, like I said, it tells you the story. You can take control of that and harness your own like strategy, your own mindset, and fix it. And you can actually get it to go where you want. So you always feel better after looking at it. You're always like, okay, now I know what I need to do. I know what I need to adjust. So those are simple financial habits you want to have. How are we feeling about this? Any questions so far about bank accounts, taxes, habits, anything there?
Are you setting up separate savings account in your bank, or are you dividing it up, tracking it in a spreadsheet or somewhere else?
Gotcha. So both.
Okay.
In my bank account, it's one account, and then it's like a checking, a savings,
Yeah.
a money market, whatever else you have. I have it divided in there so that I can actually move my money around where I want it to go. And then I have my spreadsheet where I track it and I keep the numbers there and I pay attention to it there. So it's like, it's both. I'm watching those numbers in my spreadsheet. I'm keeping track of it there. That's my bookkeeping end. And then the reality in my bank account, I'm actually moving things around. Make sense?
It does. Awesome.
Okay, cool.
We had another question come in from Amanda.
Yeah.
She asked, when you say books, what does that mean?
Oh, perfect. So books, yeah, that's like business jargon that like people like to toss around, and it's like, wait, what do you actually mean by that? And let's like just simplify it. By books, I just mean a system of tracking your numbers, basically a system of tracking your revenue, your expenses, a written down place where you have it. And like it used to be actual books, right? People have these little books where it's like they've got their credits and their debits and they're balancing all of those, and it was all written down. And now it's not really a book anymore. There's lots of different ways to do it, and that kind of gets us right into our next little topic is bookkeeping systems. So there's lots of ways that you can decide to track your expenses. There's lots of apps that help you with that. QuickBooks is one of those. Bake Diary is one that's like specific for bakers. And it sounds like Cast Iron is going to implement some of that as well. Am I right, Anna?
Maybe some. I think it would help more with like the tax documentation, but
Gotcha.
Good feedback for the product team for sure.
So whatever system you choose to use, just find one that works for you, that you can create a habit around. If you don't like spreadsheets, QuickBooks might be a good thing for you. The QuickBooks app it costs something, and I tried it out for a while. I did for like 2 years. I just did spreadsheets. And then I was like, okay, this is maybe more work that I want to do. Let me check around and see what else there could be. And so I did QuickBooks, and I realized for me, it was about $30 a month. I believe like right around there, $30 a month for QuickBooks. So it's expensive, which you roll that expense into your pricing. It becomes like an overhead cost that you can incorporate in, so you know it's covered. So that doesn't really have to be an issue, the expensiveness of it. But there is a bit of a learning curve to QuickBooks and figuring out everything that it can do. And honestly, for me, it did more than I needed it to. I just wanted to track my expenses. I wanted to, yeah, Brittany says it's so confusing. You basically have to buy QuickBooks and then you have to buy a tutorial on QuickBooks. And there's lots of like YouTube things and walkthroughs, and lots of business centers offer free trainings on QuickBooks as well. So there's ways you can learn it. It's just a matter of whether you want to invest that time into that learning curve to figure out that new system, because it can be really effective. With QuickBooks, it's like you hook it to your bank account and then you get to just like swipe like, oh, this was an ingredient, this was revenue, this was whatever. And it kind of tracks it in the background. It also tracks your mileage. So for a write-off with your car, with your gas, there, it helps track that, which is a good thing to keep track of. It's something you definitely want to track. But for me, in the end, the learning curve was a little too steep. I didn't have the time or the bandwidth to really invest in figuring it out. And I was like, I've got a system that's been working. It's been tracking things. It's done well these past years. And even though it's me entering those numbers and figuring it out, it's not a big deal to sit down once a month and run it. So I ended up just sticking with my spreadsheets and exporting my CSV files from the bank, and that's how I track it. And like I said, that works for me. So you find what works for you.
Melissa said she uses this spreadsheet app on her phone, which I think is a good idea.
Nice.
And then Ayana, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that right. She had asked, if you're not using QuickBooks, what alternatives did you recommend, or do you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are other apps, like obviously we just saw someone else who's using a spreadsheet app. And then I use Google Sheets. I just have a drive with Google Drive, and pretty much everybody does. If you've got a Gmail, you've got a Google Drive, which is a powerful tool. If you haven't used that, I've actually found that a lot of people haven't heard of it or used it before, which is surprising. But if you haven't harnessed that power yet of your Google Drive, log into it and you can actually create spreadsheets just like an Excel document with Microsoft Excel. It's the same. It's a little more user friendly, and you can save it all in the cloud so you can log into it from anywhere. So I just use Google Sheets in a drive, and I have a sheet for each month, and we're going to get into that more. I'm going to show you my sheets and exactly how I'm doing it and what it looks like, and how I've got that organized. So whatever system you do use, whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's an app, the two main things you're wanting to do is to track your income and your expenses. And let's get into that now. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and I'm going to show you my spreadsheet budget. I want to preface this, because anytime I show my own numbers, it can get a little bit like, we're just so weird about money. We can be really weird about talking about money and like being very honest and transparent with like what we actually make, because it either makes us feel like bad about ourselves, or it can make people feel like, I don't know. It's just this weird emotional, I think, stigma that we attach to money and numbers. So I want to preface it with, every baker, every food entrepreneur, your numbers are going to be different. Your costs are different. Your market is different. Where you are in your business is different. Some of you are probably in more of a startup stage where you're still learning how to price, and you're still learning where your value is. And so you're still figuring those things out. Some of you might look at these numbers that I'm showing and be like, wow, that's dang low. Like, what's wrong with you, girl? Because we all have different levels that we're at and different places that we're at in our business. And so don't care too much about what my numbers are. And especially don't get down on yourself if you're like, oh, I'm not charging that much, or I'm not making that much yet, because the whole point of this is you can, and it's all about just using this bookkeeping and the strategy and planning to actually get there. All right, so I picked a month back from July 2021 to show you guys, because ever since I started getting into coaching, I've really done a lot less with my actual cake business. I'll do like one, maybe two a month. And so it's not very exciting books. And then I had a baby too. And so I'm kind of rewinding back before when I was like hardcore doing my cake business and before I had my baby, and things really did, by my own choice and my own planning, I toned it back a little bit so I could focus on other projects that were important to me. So this is July 2021. When in my Google Drive, I have a spreadsheet that looks just like this for every single month. At the beginning of the year, I sit down and I make these spreadsheets for the whole year. I make my January, my February, and they're blank at first, but I actually go in and I project first. I make projections and forecasts of like, this is how much I want to be making. I kind of backwards engineer it. This is how much I want to be making. So this is how many cakes I need to do. These are my fixed expenses, my variable expenses. And so I go through and I project it. And then throughout the year, so you can see down here, I've got the forecast and then I'll have the actual. This is actually the actual. I just took my numbers and put it here for us today, but that's what I'll do. I'll make two kind of separate tabs on the same sheet where I'll have that forecast and then I'll have my actual numbers that I put in just to kind of check like, how did I do? And follow it along as I go. So this is July. And the way I have it set up is right here. This is the income section. This is where my income is. I've got what it was and then what I was paid for it, and as well as the sales tax. So usually it's the sales price and then the tax, and those added together is what I was total paid. There's a few in here where I didn't factor the tax into the sales price with the customer. So they just paid me what the sales price was and I just took the tax off myself. So if you just see that discrepancy, that's why. So I've got my income and my sales right here. Well, it goes all the way to here really. And then here is like where my variable expenses are. These are my project related expenses. When you budget, it's good to divide your variable expenses from your fixed expenses. Variable expenses are things you only have to pay if you sell something. Like you only have to pay for that butter if it actually goes into a cake, and then it becomes an expense. And fixed expenses, which is what I have over here, these are things I have to pay no matter what. No matter what I sell, if I sell 5 cakes, if I sell 0 cakes, I'm going to have to, pay my Canva subscription. I'm going to have to pay my insurance and things like that. And so I've divided it that way where these variable expenses, the expenses of delivery plus the project expenses, those are kind of tied to these individual projects. And then these are fixed things. And so I never really have to adjust these because I pretty much pay the same thing every time. So I've got income, variable expenses, fixed expenses, and then can you see my mouse as I'm moving? Are we actually seeing my mouse moving around?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure it's like
Mhm.
I'm not doing nothing. Like here it is, and you're not seeing it.
No, it looks
Over
good.
here, over here is where I just do all the math and add it all up, and the spreadsheet does it for me. So it adds up what my revenue was, what my cost of goods sold. If you've never heard that term, that's an accounting term. Cost of goods sold is those variable expenses, basically. The sales tax, the fixed expenses, and then there's the net income. So this is actually what I pay myself for the month. So when I track things in here, I typically, my brain just doesn't enjoy tracking things down to the penny when I can, and that's why I export my CVS file so I can track things down to the penny. But just for my own sake of like a surface level glance of like, here's what I did, here's how it went. I tend to just estimate things on my budget because it's like it gets overwhelming for me to do it down to the penny. So I'll show you where I actually do track things down to the penny. But here it's like my project expenses. I estimate and I round up a little bit, so I make sure that I'm estimating my project expenses well. but I'm not doing it down to like the very penny. And the reason why I'm pretty good at estimating what these are is because I know my pricing, and I've sat down and I've priced things out, like the cost of a cup of flour and the cost of that little bit of plastic that I'm using in my cake. And if you've ever taken my pricing mastermind class, that is such a good, powerful one, because that really digs into where these numbers come from, why I price it the way I do, and how I know what those expenses are, how I know I'm not missing anything. That's all in my pricing mastermind course. If you're interested in that, you can message me afterwards and I'd be happy to send you the link for it. But that is why I know what to estimate, is because I have dug really deep into my numbers and I've seen it spread out in a spreadsheet. I know exactly what goes into it. I'll also preface that this is July 2021. And so these expenses are going to look a little bit lower than they probably would this year, because ingredient costs have gone up a lot. But this is what they were back in 2021. The other way I divide it, you can see I've kind of divided what types of income I have. So I've got my orders, I've got my farmers markets, and I've got my classes. Again, the way you make money is up to you, and your numbers will tell you which way you want to go. For me, during this time, July 2021, I was pregnant. And so instead of doing a ton of orders, I opted, and I planned this months in ahead. I knew exactly, like, I knew what this was going to be about like 4 or 5 months in advance, because I planned it. And I knew I was going to teach these classes because I'm pregnant and I don't want to spend so much time in my feet working with customers. I want to just bake my cake, show up at class. That was a strategic move I made. I was like, how am I going to make the income I want? I'm going to teach a class and I need to get this many people. So it was all planned and it was all projected. And this amount of work, I did 2 farmers markets, and the farmers markets, those were advertising opportunities for my cake class. So you can see right here, I did not make a lot of money off of those, because like this, I made $308 and it costed $175 to be there at that market and for the expenses there. But people signed up for my class, which was my goal. That was the whole point, was I was advertising my class. And that's why I did those markets. And this year, it's like I wouldn't have done any markets because I wasn't advertising to that specific target market of people for any kinds of classes that I had. All of this is strategic and planned based around what my goals are. So this, I just, when I go and fill it in and project, I don't, if it's already scheduled, if the cake's already scheduled, then I'll say like, oh, I've got this cake. But if it's not, then I'll just say like, I want wedding cake number 1, wedding cake number 2, and this is the price range that I'm looking to book that in. And the spreadsheet will run those numbers and you can project and see ahead and kind of know like, all right, in July, this is what's going to be happening.
Hey, Brett, we had some quick questions.
Yeah, let's do them.
Few people recommended the pricing mastermind, which is great.
Oh, thank you guys. It's amazing. It's such a good, and I'm not just tooting my own horn, but I'm like, I spent a year researching and filming and writing that class, because sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent now. There's calculators out there where someone will like spit out a number for you. Like you can plug in what you're doing and it'll spit out a number. But if you don't actually know it, you can't make decisions around it. And I just think it's so important. So that's what that class teaches you, is actually how to understand your numbers and step confidently into them. Anyways, tangent done, soapbox done.
Awesome. Well, we had one good, I thought, nitty-gritty question.
Yeah.
He had asked, where would you put an expense, like a one-time cost for a farmer's market tent? It's not quite variable, not quite fixed. Where would you put it?
That's right here. So in my market here, that was an expense of this particular project. It was a variable expense related to this project. It wasn't fixed, because like if you're not paying it every single month, that's how you know. A fixed expense is something that you're paying reoccurring, and it's usually the same amount every single time, and you're going to have to pay it no matter what. That market fee is a fee associated with that project. It's a variable expense. It's a cost of your goods sold. And so it's like an overhead expense of that project, a variable overhead expense to that project. So for me, this particular market was, I want to say $25 a fee to be there, which is really good fee on a market booth. And that's where it's hiding, is in this 175. This was my ingredient costs, my cake boxes that I had. It was like the forks and napkins I handed out, and it was that market fee. That's where I put it, was on this line. So it's being calculated into there, and then this is where it lives on my little budget.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, any other questions there, Anna? Are we good to roll along?
I think we're good to roll. Lots of
Okay.
fans of the pricing mastermind though, which is great.
Oh yeah, way to go, guys. I'm so proud of you for doing that course. Oh, it's hard to dig into. It's hard to do the work with your numbers, but once you do it, it's like it just changes everything. So this is July. And this is how I track it surface level, to know what I'm doing, to plan my income, and to just understand my cash flow and know, like, what should I be paying myself based on the work I did. And that's actually a point I skipped over in the beginning of why bookkeeping is important, is because you need to keep an eye on your cash flow. You want to make sure you've got money in your business to make those ingredient purchases and those supplies purchases, and that the money that you're paying yourself, or all the money going out, that it's actually, you know, coming out in your favor. And I definitely believe that food entrepreneurs can make money from day one if you're tracking it, and if you're smart, and if you actually pay attention to your numbers. Especially when we're home bakers, and there's not like this big startup cost of like, dang it, we got to go rent a place or buy a place, like we need a lease, we need all this big equipment. Like, you pretty much have everything you need to start. And so there's not a lot of startup costs there, and I think you can definitely make money from day one. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a sec. Again, it's like, this is a mom brain. Mom brain's a thing, you guys, where your thoughts just like pack their bags and walk out the door, and you're like, no, please, I need you to stay. And they go anyways. So this is what I paid myself. This is what I paid myself for July. And let's get into the more nitty gritty expense tracking. Let me see if I can move this bar. There we go. So when I actually want to track things down to the penny for tax purposes, like I have to report, you know, exactly what I made, exactly what I spent. This is my own surface level way of tracking it. But to actually get those numbers, this is what I do. I go into my bank account, and I'm almost positive any bank that has an online banking feature, you should be able to do this, where you can export a CVS file or CSV. CVS is a drugstore. CSV file is something you can export in spreadsheet form, where it just has all your transactions. So I exported this one, and then I just uploaded it into my Google Sheets. And so once a month I do this, where I'll export this and I'll save it. I've got my July budget with the forecast, the actual numbers, and then I've got my July CSV file, which this is what QuickBooks is doing for you. It's tracking all of these. So all I have to do is go in and like check these out and say, all right, this was income. This was a subscription. I can't spell right now. This was supplies. It was flowers for cake. This was, and so some of them are transfers. It's like I have to just go through and pick out what these are. This was an ingredient cost. This was revenue. Somebody paid me. So I can see what went out. I can see what went in. So I'll just go through and name what all of these were. So it's good to do it within the month that you actually made those purchases, so you can remember what they were. And it's good to track, to keep your receipts as well. That's pretty typical business practice, to save your receipts so you can actually prove even further. Like if you were ever to get audited, I don't know if they really do that to small business owners, but I'm sure they do somewhere. But if you should keep your receipts so that you can actually say like, oh, I said that I spent this here at Walmart. Like, well, here's the receipt. You can actually see I spent it on butter. So I have a pocket in my purse where I'll just take my receipts and I shove them in there, or you can download your Amazon receipts. But anyways, yeah, you'll just go through and sort these out. what came in, what went out, and categorize them into what they are. And then I'll sort the whole sheet. So if we were to go through and do a few more, this is also a subscription. This was ingredients. This was ingredients. This was supplies. This was supplies. This was revenue. So I'll just go through, and then you can sort the whole sheet. And like I said, this is my way of doing it. And if you have a way that actually fits you better, or you don't like working with spreadsheets, you can definitely do it how you want. So I'm just going into data, and I'm going to sort the sheet. And I want to, oh, there we go. I want to do the advanced sorting because I want to sort by column F. I want to just group everything together so I can see all my income, all my supplies. And so I'll sort it that way. And there you go. It groups everything for you. So the dates get a little out of whack, but then you're able to see, okay, this was the income. And I obviously didn't go through and name all of it. These were all the ingredients. This is where the revenue was. Oh, I guess income was revenue. I should rename that. I called it two different things. And then you can sort it just so you can group them together. And then over here, I'll just type it out and see what the totals were. I would take all my revenues and put them right here, all my ingredients, and total them up here. That way, when it's time to do your taxes, you can do those write-offs, and you can say, this is how much money was an expense toward ingredients. This is how much money went towards supplies. And depending on how you do your taxes, so I've done them ourselves for the past few years with H&R Block, just like tax software, where I'll log in, and it's pretty like user friendly for the most part, but they'll just give you pictures like how much went to your gas, how much went to office supplies, and you can kind of choose through those and sort them out. And if you've got your books, then that is really easy. You just have to pull these numbers up and drop them in. And then if you have a tax professional, even better, because then you can just send them this and they'll do it for you. And that was really fun last year to have somebody do it. And in fact, if we go back to our budget, so under my fixed expenses, down here, I have actually factored in tax preparation as a fixed expense because it was $500 for me, my business, and my husband's business to get done. And so I kind of just split that between our personal and our business. And I was like, I need to be setting aside $20 a month so I can have that tax preparation at the end of the year. So I factor that in as a fixed cost, a fixed expense. That way the money is staying inside my bank account. So when tax time comes, I can pay my tax professional to do it for me. So yeah, that's how I track my expenses. That is how I budget and forecast. And that's basically what I do for bookkeeping. And I'm sure there's someone smarter than me in finance could say like, well, then you should be investing, or then, you should do this. But for me, as a small business owner based out of home, this has worked really well. And it's got me where I am today. And it's covered my legal bases. And so I hope what you take away from this is that bookkeeping is really powerful, that you should be doing it, and just find the system that works for you and let your numbers tell you the story of where your business should go. So as we are kind of coming to an end, I want to see if there's any other questions that have popped up. Have I missed any, Anna?
Not so far. Let's open it up to the group, and then I
Yeah.
definitely have some questions as well.
Okay.
Some are coming in. Can you elaborate on the meal expense?
Yeah. So that I just noticed that when I go out on deliveries, sometimes I would need to stop for dinner. Be like, I'll do a 2-hour delivery. It's 2 hours away, deliver a wedding cake, and I'm starving. And so I buy dinner. That's a business expense. I'm on a business trip. And so that meal became part of my budget. And it's something that I can write off come tax time. So I just gave myself a little monthly allowance. Like every month I've got $25, and I can adjust that depending on like how many orders are coming up, or, I can look ahead and say like, I'm going on this big delivery, or I'm doing this. And so it just allows me to take care of myself as my only employee when I'm out doing business. there is money there that I know that I can stop and get food, and it's a write-off because it's a business expense.
Awesome. And then in gas, is that under delivery expense?
Yeah, that's where I put it, is under the delivery expense. And where I track the gas is a tricky one. Because it's our personal car. And so a lot of times what's happening is we're filling it up as a family, and then I use part of that gas on my delivery. So sometimes when I'm out on delivery, I'll fill it up and I'll use my business credit card to know that that was a business expense. And what we did with our tax professional last year is we honestly just decided, she's like, what percentage would you say is personal use of your car, and what percentage is home use or is business use? So personal use, business use. And I was like, it's probably 60% personal, 40% business. And at this year, I've upped that even more, because I've been, like I said, wrapping my business into everyday life, where pretty much I'd say 80% of our trips become business trips, because I do business when I go out. And so we set that percentage, and then we went through our gas purchases on our personal card as well as mine on my business card, and then we split them. We're like, all right, 80% is dedicated to or last year was 60-40, 40% is for business, 60% was for personal, and that's how we did it. Which I was like, really? It's that easy? Like, that's all you're doing? But yeah, that's basically all they're doing. And if you can explain to someone like, yeah, this is how we figured that out, then you're good.
Awesome. Super helpful. And then I think a question came through. I assume the question is about the fixed expenses, but for clarity, do you always break down yearly expenses into monthly for tracking?
Yeah. Monthly is just a good container. That's just kind of how we operate as humans. We're usually paid a paycheck monthly, or we pay our rent monthly. And so I do break it into monthly containers. I feel like that's just a great way to keep yourself in check, to make sure you're paying attention to it, and to just forecast things in smaller increments than for the whole year. It's like breaking down a goal, into smaller steps. Gosh, I had another thought and it just ran away from me again. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. If it comes back to me, I'll let you know. But yeah, basically, yeah, I divide it into months, just because that's just how we do things as humans.
Love it. Okay, we have another gas question, and it's just clarifying. So let's say you go to the grocery store and buy groceries for your family and for your business. Do you write off that gas, or is it only for deliveries?
Yeah, I write off that gas too. And so that's why I say, like, yeah, if you go to the grocery store, if you're going to a friend's house, stop at the grocery store, buy a box of butter, and then that trip becomes a business trip. And so that gas gets written off. The other thing with a car that you can write off at tax time is like it depends on how you do it, because you can depreciate the value of your car. And so like that wear and tear on your car, part of that gets wrapped into a write-off as well. And how that happens is like it was a little more math than I can actually remember how to do. If you're doing a tax software, it can help you do it. It'll walk you through it. But the main thing you need to know is at the beginning of the year what your mileage was on your car, and then know what it was at the end of the year. And then again, you'll break up the percentage, and there's like a standard deduction related to cars that you can take. So if you know your mileage, or know like about what it was, it's good to know exactly what it was. I didn't last year, and she was like, let's just like figure it out then, and like make our best guess of what your mileage was at the beginning of the year. And then we knew what it was at the end of the year. We broke it up 60-40, and we were able to allocate some of that wear and tear and the depreciation of the car. I think that's the right word for it, was also a write-off. So it was the gas and that wear and tear on the car. So yeah, even if it's not a delivery, if you're going to buy ingredients, if you're going to meet with a customer, if you're, I don't know, I'm trying to think of another example of where I go to do business. I just try to do business when I'm out and about, and so that things become business expenses.
Awesome. So everyone, check your mileage on January 1st. Good to know. Brett, do you keep like a notebook in your car? How do you track that on your phone?
Yeah. Good question. So I do have an app that tracks that. QuickBooks will do it for you. And then there's also, for me, I was like, the QuickBooks was too expensive. So I actually just bought an app that tracks just my mileage, and it's like $6 a month. And so that, which is funny because back in July, I don't think I had that app yet. And so like that would be on here too, as probably, I guess it doesn't really have a category here, but it would be somewhere under here as like mileage app age, no, mileage app, $6. So I would add that in, right? So I pay $6 a month for my mileage app, and it just runs in the background, and it's a little more friendly than QuickBooks, but yeah, it pops up and it's like, was that a business trip or a personal trip? And you just swipe left to right or left to right, and then it tracks that data for you. You can also just kind of, again, backtrack. It's like you can do it the hard way or the easy way. If you track it as you go, then you're set. You can do it on a notebook, you can do it with an app, or you can look backwards on your whole year and think, all right, I went about once a day to the grocery store for business times, 6 days a week times this many weeks, and like you can estimate it. And that's like acceptable if you can like, back it up with what you were thinking and how you got to those numbers and show it on paper, then that's totally acceptable. But I definitely recommend doing it the easier way and tracking it as you go.
Awesome. Will you share the mileage app name?
Yeah, let me look at it.
Okay, and then we have some other questions as well. Trying to get some specifics for the audience for them to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one I use is called Mile IQ. I'll show you what it looks like.
Mile IQ, everyone.
You
Awesome.
see it? It's a little fuzzy right there. That's it. Mile IQ.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, we did get another question, which was, is there a certain percentage you recommend putting into your savings to roll back into your business each month?
Yeah, so that, if you've taken my pricing mastermind course, you know that I refer to that as profit, because you aren't a nonprofit business. So your business should be making money. You should be making a paycheck, and your business should be making a paycheck. And that's what those business savings are. So when you price things out, I have that profit portion in my price, that there's a percentage of every order. And for me, I chose 10%, because as a home baker, I want to be saving for my business, but I also, the whole point is that I want to be making my money that I can be spending. And so 10% for me, especially with my higher end wedding cakes that I do, that's a good chunk that I'm able to set aside, and it builds up really fast. It's honestly comes kind of down to your business, your rules, what you feel like you want to allocate towards business savings. You get to kind of choose that number. So I chose 10%, and you can see here it ended up being about $320, $323 that I set aside into business savings, and still was able to pay myself that $1,624. So that's how much that I set aside, but you're totally welcome to do higher or slightly lower. Just make sure you're in a habit of putting a little bit aside for your business, paying your business.
Awesome. I love it. And then another question on the expenses. So when you put expenses in the spreadsheet, do you include the receipt confirmation number of purchase, or just the category total and then the date?
I have not gotten that nitpicky with my expenses. Part of the reason is because even with my tax professional doing our taxes last year, she didn't want to see the receipts. The receipts are like, if you ever get audited by the IRS, that you've got like something to back up your bookkeeping, and like a little more solid, concrete, like, yeah, this is where it went towards. So I don't get super picky, like connecting each of these with the receipt number or where it is. It's all just in my purse. And I've never had to use them. I've never had to show them to anyone, but if I ever did, I've got them, is basically where I stand. So hopefully that's not a terrible answer, but if you decide you want to, you could totally create a little spot in your spreadsheet that's like you can write down what number receipt it was and keep those in a file and organize them better than I have. So
Awesome. I love it. And that was the last question, and great timing because it is
awesome.
top of the hour.
Solid, you guys. Way to go.
We're getting some nice notes, informative, easy to follow, perfect level. So the audience is quite happy with the information. As am I. I learned a lot.
Oh, cool.
Thank you so much, Brette, for joining us and
yeah,
for informing our audience about this.
Before we wrap up, sorry, Anna, but I just didn't want everyone to jump off yet. Because before we wrap up, I wanted to say thank you to Cast Iron for hosting this, because they do amazing work for food entrepreneurs like us who are trying to figure out this business thing and actually make it work. So thank you guys for hosting this, number one. And number two, if you guys enjoyed this, if you want to learn even more from me, I have a special event coming up in just a few weeks. It's called Bake It Happen, and it's a summit for home bakers where I'm going to actually help you do a business plan, set some procedures and policies, help you get a marketing strategy built, because I am sick and tired of, so it's like true, I'm tired of home bakers struggling so much because it's so hard, and it is. And I'm like, I'm done with that. I'm like, I want to help you. I want to help you actually make it work. So at this Bake It Happen Summit, it's going to be 3 days of live coaching where we'll have sessions like this. We're going to make a business plan together. I'm going to help you get everything ready for 2023. We're going to go through this together. I'll give you my templates. We're going to financial map and plan for the year. And I'm like, get ready for your biggest success yet, because I am going to help you make it happen. So if you want to come to that, I would love to be able to send you the link. How can I do that, Anna? How can I send them the registration link? Can I drop it in the chat?
You can drop in the chat. We can send it in the follow-up. And then for those watching the recording, I'm going to drop it in the comments as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So that'll be there available for everyone. Perfect. So it's up there.
I'm still screen sharing, aren't I? You guys are still
You are. You are.
That's okay. So here it is. Let me drop it in the chat for you guys. I would love to have you there. It's going to be an amazing 3 days together. And if you register, you get the recordings for every session. I know some people are like, you only get them for a week. And I'm like, the point is that it's going to help you. And so I won't restrict your access to those recordings, but it's going to be awesome. I hope that you guys can come. I hope you can bring a friend, because everybody needs to be there. But yeah.
Okay, you heard it here. Join Bake It Happen. We have all the links, and we will make sure to send that in the follow-up. For those asking, yes, you will get this recording, both those who have joined, and if you maybe had a friend that had signed up, there was several dozen more that had signed up that want the recording. So you'll get that just in time. And then for those interested in Cast Iron, you can find Cast Iron at castiron.me, or you're welcome to reach out to me. My name's Anna, and my email is anna@castiron.me. I'd love to talk to all of you as well. With that, I think that's the end of the session. Thank you so much, Brette. This was amazing. And thank you to our audience for being so engaged. This was great.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your night.